Hello, everyone. This is Ben Dunn, your AP Sensei, a founder of Antarctic Press, celebrating its 40th anniversary. Um, I don't often do these videos because I'm a pretty busy guy. I do other things. I'm now archiving all the AP stuff from the past 40 years, and I'm also writer and drawer of comics like Ninja High School and Kendra and Tomorrow Girl, and I'm also editorial staff where I go ahead and look over people's submissions and put together and assemble books and stuff like that. So I, I watch a lot of videos about comics and stuff like that, and the hobby of collecting comics is no longer really a hobby. It's a speculation. I was listening to a podcast or a video of them talking about comics, and all they were talking about were the covers. That's it. Just the covers. Who did the covers? I'm beginning to think comics no longer matter to people in terms of story, and characters and how it affects people. No one talks about that. Very few people talk about what's inside the comics as far as speculation is concerned, as far as, buying it for the enjoyment of it. And it really is, something that I think is concerning to the hobby because what's the main reason to buy comics to begin with? Is to read it, to enjoy it, to understand the characters and the stories and things like that. And, a lot of effort is being made into doing, these characters and stories, or there used to be a lot of effort. Now I'm not so sure. Especially for the big two, it seems like they don't even bother with the interior anymore, or at least for story wise and character wise. They'll just throw whatever they can, so it fills another issue, and all they focus on are the covers, and that really is to me detrimental to the hobby. In the past, covers were important, but they weren't so important because it was mainly used to sell what's inside. The covers were used to generate excitement, so that you would want to pick up the book and read the stories inside. Now it's not so much the case, other than people, especially collectors and speculators and things like that, they just buy the comic because that's all they want is the cover. It looks good in a slab, and that's really what it comes down to. There's a lot of comics out there that have great covers. Don't get me wrong, but are they really buying the comic because, there's some sort of rare cover variant? I mean, who buys this stuff anyway? I mean, for the vast majority of people, out there, they don't buy it because the cover is a variant or it's rare or something. Only people within the hobby do that. If they just have this, for some reason, this internal mechanism inside that compels them to want to own something that in the grand scheme of things matters very little. They just want to buy it so they have it and then sell it at a profit. Now, that's the way it is a lot of times in hobbies. But, the whole idea of a hobby, especially collecting comics, is, at least for me anyway, is because I like the stories. I like the art. I like the characters. I like to, I'll go through $1 bins, and I'll just randomly pick comics that look interesting. And for $1, it's a low buy-in. And it just seems odd to me how the direction the hobby is going is because it just seems all it is, it's about, finding the latest new cover that's rare and, bragging about how much they got, and it always seems strange to me that especially some comic retailers always seem to brag about how little they pay for a collection and how much they sell a comic for. It's just never about trying to promote the hobby in general, saying, yeah, I recommend this comic because it's got a good story. It's got great characters. I know my customers enough that I can recommend certain things to them. Instead of saying, "Oh, did you get that latest variant cover? Oh, don't miss out on this, special cover." It just it saddens me to feel that people are buying comics just for the cover. I mean, I often speculated, you know what? Why even bother with the interiors? Don't even bother with interiors. You could just have scribbling, or no, just print a blank book and have a great cover on it. When you slab it, no one's going to know there's anything inside of it. You can't open it. Yes, you can. You can open it and try to read it. But, no one's really going to open it and read it because they can't. Once it's slabbed, it can't be read. I think, what would be a nice thing for CGC to do, or some of these slabbing companies, to put a little QR code in there that links to the actual interior of the books so that people can see the interior of the books and read them. I mean, I think that would be a great service that they could offer to people who actually want to read the comic and see what the interior of the comic looks like. When you buy a slab comic, that's it. You don't really see what's inside. You can't tell what's inside. It could all be blank pages as far as you know. And you could never tell because no one knows. In fact, if comic book publishers were really smart, they would have pre-slabbed comics. Just sell them on the stand. Say pre-slabbed comics. Here you go. And I will bet you people will buy them. It's just one of those weird things I always found bizarre about our hobby. Comics were meant to be read. Comics were meant to be enjoyed. And to identify with the characters. To bring you into a world that's different and new and maybe teach you something, maybe learn something. But if you just buy a comic for the cover, what's the point? There's no point. What is the real reason to buy a comic book anyway, other than to read the whole soap? That's like buying a car and never driving it. Unless you're one of those rich collectors out there who just buy cars because they like them, and they have no intention of ever driving them ever. You buy a car because it's utilitarian. Because it's and the same can be said about comics. You buy comics to enjoy. You go to a movie. You don't buy a ticket to a movie, look at the poster, and then leave. No. You go in and see the movie. You go and see how much you enjoy it. Anyway, I just really lament the direction our comic book hobby is going in. It just saddens me to see that so few people are jumping on because there's no good stories anymore. There's no good. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of independent comics who believe. It's like a lot like the punk rock scene that came in the mid early to the late 70s. Where these musicians decided, we're tired of all this overproduced, over glamorized music, and we're just going to go back to the essential. The essential primordial ooze that created rock and roll to begin with. And this is where I think indie comics come in. They are people who have a desire, and, have a drive to create new comics because they want to create them. They want people to read them. And I think those will be the ones who will save the actual industry, not the big two, not any of the mainstream, big publishers. They're only concerned about is content. That's it. People are concerned, about how a book looks in a slab. And I think that is going to be the death knell of the mainstream comics. And I think indie comics will take over eventually. I may be wholly optimistic, since I myself, I'll say that I am a small independent comic book creator and publisher, so I have a little stake in the game. But that's what we need, is we need skin in the game. So anyway, that's enough for me ranting on. And I really believe that if we really want to save the comic industry, we need to bring back really good comics so that people will return to comic book stores and support comics that make a difference. Till next time, this has been done. Just a reminder that I do have a Kickstarter now live featuring the 200th issue of Ninja High School. Yes, 200 issues. Can you believe it? Founded in 1987. Right now, I am offering a historic exclusive 200th issue on Kickstarter that will be different than the actual newsstand and direct market version. So don't miss out. Link will be below, and hopefully you'll be a backer for Ninja High School number 200.
Welcome to my pretty school. You can no see classmates. They can do super communication. You are gonna know people summer vacation. Rolling star, lorry lorry. Rolling star, lorry lorry. Rolling star, lorry lorry. Hard-to-run karate chop. Modelo jump kick. We can cook some pork chops. After eating, take a nap. Rolling star, lorry lorry. Rolling star, lorry lorry. Rolling star, lorry lorry.